Very, very, very. I feel like I'm on a TV set. Cool.
Okay, perfect. We are live.
Cool. I'll take this jacket actually. Should I take off the jacket? Is it better?
No, I think it's fine. So we are live.
Oh.
So I just like to know what it is. So perfect. You know, these are millennials. So welcome to our Millennials Do Business. So good evening once again, everyone. You are live with Girl Positive. And so I'd like to just give that really bubbly and creative welcome to Grant Appel, which is the Head of Sales and Business Development at Lifecheq. And also, once again, welcome to all of you that's viewing in our live stream on the Girl Positive page this evening. So I'd like to remind us that you are welcome to share your comments and questions of anything that sort of moves you or inspires you, or something that you might have a question or two about with the specific kind of expert content that Grant Appel will be sharing with us this evening. And so in the next minute, I will give over to Grant to start his presentation, but just for me to give you a quick introduction and background about our expert this evening. Grant's eyes are going big. So interesting. I feel so privileged, but Grant is a qualified chartered accountant and as I mentioned before, Head of Sales and Business Development at Lifecheq, which is an independent, innovative financial advisory firm working with professionals, entrepreneurs, and business owners. Okay, so before joining Lifecheq, Grant worked at the financial services group PSG, consult as an assistant to the group COO and CFO, working with executives on projects across each of the diverse, I think that's divisions of the group. So in your current role, Grant, you combine your experience in personal financial services with your love for people, connecting with different individuals to a service that helps them develop their career, their financial strategies, as well as the most important goals in life. So welcome once again, Grant Appel from Lifecheq, Sales and Business Development Head. So Grant, over to you. Yeah, please, we are open to sharing the data, the knowledge, and also maybe the bit of inspiration that you have for each of us, not just as women, but men in business and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for your time.
That's a pleasure. Thanks, Natasha. That's wow. That's a very good, that's an impressive welcome. I appreciate it very much.
Pleasure.
I've shared the screen, so you should be able to see that. And I think let's do this. Good evening, everybody. I hope you are doing well. Very happy to be here. I'm a friend of Natasha's. I was very honored when she reached out to me, and I know, particularly for a group like this, you know, women who are aspiring and sort of looking to really do great things. I feel quite privileged to be able to share a little bit of my expertise over here. And yeah, just thanks for inviting me. And I hope that what I say will be useful. If you have any questions, relay them to Natasha. I'll be happy to engage in any way that's helpful. What I want to talk about, I think maybe just to lean on the introduction that Natasha gave. I work for Lifecheq, and one of the things that we do, and our work really revolves around, is how do you think about your finances effectively today. And really, when we took time to build this business, we thought about the holistic nature of our lives and recognizing that, being successful in life is not having a big bank balance when you die, but rather how do you shape your finances so that you are able to enjoy the experiences that matter. And in that journey, there are a lot of things that you encounter. There's a lot of sort of decisions that you have to make in life. Decisions around family, around career, around sort of your professional trajectory that you need to think about. And what we do as a business is, as we engage with different themes, we develop life strategies for our clients to navigate big decisions, or in this particular case, big moments in your life. And one of the things that has affected all of our clients over the past several months has been COVID. So COVID has fundamentally changed the way we thought about 2020. Many of us put 2019 behind us, joined 2020, and COVID hit and literally just turned everything upside down. And so what I want to share with you a little bit is COVID and the impact that COVID's had on us. So how has it shocked us? And then the question is, what does that mean for us individually and as professionals? What does it mean for our finances? What does it mean for our careers? And how do we navigate this moment to provide ourselves with the best opportunity, not just only to survive, but to thrive in the midst of COVID? So let's get going. And that's a little bit about what we do. Just as we start, this is a little, so I do these talks for certain communities sort of on my own time. And one of the things that we've developed is a tool for our clients. This is a free version of the tool. And if you're live now, this is sort of just a gift to you. So take down that link, and you might want to just share it in the chat or something. It's a planning tool that helps you sort of do a back of the envelope budgeting plan, given the potential impact that COVID might have on you. So if there's time at the end, I'll do a bit of a demo for you, but you can log into this with Google or anything like that. It's secure, and you're able to play around with different scenarios. If COVID goes on long, if it's short. So I'm just putting that out there for you. And if there's time, I'll take you through it. So let's run through the talk. I'm going to run through a few slides, which by now would have been quite obvious for most of us. But I think looking at these things graphically is quite profound. So this slide is some data that we took of global data around restaurant bookings. And it shows a timeline and what sort of restaurant bookings were like compared to normal, and then what happened after COVID. So things were running along smoothly. Governments began to announce social distancing. People realized that lockdowns were coming. There was a spike in restaurant activity, and I was one of them for sure, as I realized I might not be able to get a pizza again for like a few months. So you see that little spike over there around about the 9th of March, and then this precipitous drop off within a week to zero. And I just want you to imagine yourself in the shoes of a restaurateur or of somebody who's employed in the restaurant industry, or somebody who's orientated their career to work in this place. This is a dramatic impact for anybody who ever had any designs on a career in this space. And you can extrapolate to different other industries, which we'll look at in a second. Small businesses, for example, and I know, Natasha, you are an entrepreneur. Many people in this community might also be small business owners or have designs on having a small business. Look at the impact of COVID on this. Over time, as COVID became a thing, revenue dropped. This is information from Yoko, one of our sort of close business partners. We know them quite well. Then COVID, the lockdowns were announced and revenue increased. And then immediately when lockdowns were announced, most small businesses' revenue dropped from 80% to 95%. Huge impact on the sort of going concern of those businesses. And that just got worse over time. And what does this mean practically? Because I think you can think of COVID as maybe potentially a blip in the radar. And we'll talk today about the fact that we don't actually think it will be just a blip in the radar. But if it were just a blip in the radar and things were to return to normal, you might think that actually, just wait it out for a few months and things will return back to normal. But if you look at this graph shows the amount of cash that businesses generally keep on hand. So this is data collated from Yoko, for instance, and a few other sources. And if you look at this, what it's really saying is that by the time, we had a 21-day lockdown, which was the original period of the lockdown, all those businesses, up until those that had 21 days cash, all would have had their cash reserves wiped out, if you consider that they were still paying rent and salaries and all those things. After 5 weeks, 60% of the businesses in this graph would have had all the cash wiped out, which means that they would have potentially ceased to function as a going concern without any kind of intervention. Then we realized that the lockdown won't end, but it actually goes from level 5 to level 4. We're currently only level 3. And there are certain industries, so if you're in the cigarette industry, who still aren't able to sell their goods. And the impact on the ability of these companies to continue is dramatic. And again, if you're employed in that industry, if you are an owner in that industry, or even if you've built your career around potentially working in an industry like that, this is not a small thing for you. Financial markets have reflected all our fears about COVID. So you can see that the top graph talks about, these are sort of indices for the JSE and global indices, and there was this drop off. There's been a bit of recovery more recently. And then also, the Rand dollar exchange rate reflects our fears about, as a vulnerable economy, when it comes to uncertainty in the markets, the depreciation of the Rand. And we haven't felt it as much because, we're not able to travel, and we're not importing as much as we used to because we're all at home. But we know that when the Rand dollar exchange rate is bad, this is bad for many things. Cost of fuel, that being passed on to goods, inflation in various forms hits us as consumers. And our ability to stay in our lifestyles is depreciated quite tremendously. And then this graph reflects many companies that have been impacted quite negatively. You'll see the S&P 500, which just represents a group of companies in the States. So a good indicator of where the market is at, just dropped off. And then particular companies, especially you will see some of the names you'll recognize on the right. So Uber, Lyft, a whole bunch of sort of companies, we just showed them individually, had a huge impact on their valuations, what people thought about those businesses. Now, the interesting thing here, and I think the next slide begins to really talk about some of the opportunities that exist. Because COVID has not been, it's not all doom and gloom, in spite of everything that I've showed you right now. COVID has not been an equal opportunity offender. What that means is there have been certain industries and companies that have been dramatically negatively impacted by COVID-19. And we'll talk about some of the ways in which these companies will be impacted long-term. So it might not just be this once-off impact. But at the same time, there have been several companies who have benefited from COVID. I want you to look at this graph. So this graph points out a few. So the last line over there is the S&P 500. So there's a group of companies in the States that has gone down. But while that has gone down, look at some of the companies on the right-hand side that have actually benefited. And one of the companies is the very platform that we're using now, Zoom. I don't know how many of you have ever used Zoom before March this year. All of us are now using Zoom right now. And the impact of Zoom has been tremendous. In the period of a month, it went up 80%. And in a large part because they've been building this business for 10 years. I think they were founded around about 2010, 2011. They've been building a business for the future, and COVID has really brought the future to now, so that there's a need, for certain kinds of solutions, among which are the ability to allow people to connect when you can't drive around or fly around or hug people or talk to people face to face. And so while it's been negative in some regards, there's been a huge opportunity for people who are solving a very particular kind of problem. And as we move into the next part of the presentation, I really want you to think about, your career, the things that you're doing right now. And the question that you want to really ask yourself is, the things that I'm investing my time and my resources in, the way I'm developing my career, is it really setting me up for success in the way that it appears that the world is moving? And that's really the opportunity as we speak about this, to really build our careers so that they are forward-looking and really give us the best chance of being successful. And I believe there are many opportunities for us right now. What does it mean for your career and business? one of the ways in which we like to sort of unpack these themes is through using individual stories. So there are a few personas I just want to introduce you to. We'll look at one of them in some detail, so Lerato. But if you can imagine, these individuals, you can imagine how they might be affected by COVID. So Andile is a physiotherapist. During COVID, whether it was an essential service or not, going around touching and massaging people is a high-risk activity. Many people in his position would have, stopped sort of doing what they do for a period of time, and they might have to pivot. Lerato is managing hospitality. Hotels, all of them have closed down during COVID except for one or two. Christopher's in mining, and Janine owns a restaurant. All of them, to some degree or another, affected negatively by COVID. So the first thing you need to think about, and what they would have to think about, is, how do you think about your career? Have your plans changed? Before this, what were you planning on doing? To stay in your current job, or were you planning on moving? How do you reassess that decision? What kind of work are you involved in currently? What are your core strengths? What are the problems that you're good at solving? And where do you ultimately see yourself? These are questions you want to be asking yourself right now. And then how will your current situation be impacted? So what is the impact of the crisis on your industry, on your particular company? What are the problems that have arisen that you might be able to help solve? And if you're not able to do that, what steps do you need to take to transition from where you are to where you're most likely to have success? And I can answer those questions for you explicitly because each of our situations are different. But I'll provide like a bigger sort of framework within which you can think about these decisions. And then hopefully along your own journey, you'll be able to think about them more specifically. And again, not negatively necessarily, but positively. What are the opportunities that are existing that I am uniquely positioned to provide a solution to? So again, same question: if you're running a business or you running your own side hustle, how will your industry be affected? Is your business model broken? Like, are things never really going to be the same again for you? Do you need to pivot, or do you need to persevere? And if you do decide you need to pivot, how do you transition? At this time, also your finances become quite important. And it's like, so one of these tricky things. When you talk about finances, people often become very uncomfortable, because I think for many of us, well, first of all, it's very personal. And for many of us, we haven't actually been the best custodians of our finances. And I think particularly in certain communities, where we've maybe had disadvantages in the past, our parents maybe never had the opportunities we had. We never had good financial modeling of like how to actually manage a budget, manage income, manage the opportunities that we have, the easy access to credit and things have really shaped our generation. And in our work with professionals, we're finding that regardless of your profession, whether you're an actuary or a CA or a teacher or whatever it is that you're doing, we find that there's this underlying current of not the best financial habits. And for those who have managed their finances well, pre-COVID, even if you've been hit by something quite bad, you're much better able to navigate this period of uncertainty than those of us who've overextended ourselves. And it's probably a good point for those of you who haven't to think about, sort of use this as a teaching moment for the future. For those of you who still have work, to be able to position yourself better, to be able to navigate future difficulties. So things like having an emergency fund, things like having a good credit record, so that in the case of an emergency, you can tap into it. So we don't recommend using credit injudiciously, but when it's needed, it's a time like this when it's an emergency that you might need to tap into it, and you're able to. Long-term savings, medical aid, and then questions around should you invest, shouldn't you invest? These are questions that generally come to the fore at a time like this. We won't talk about all of them, but if there are any questions around these, I'll be happy to field them at the end. I'm going to put up this slide very quickly. I don't want to talk too long. I'd rather have, if there are questions at the end, questions coming from the audience. When does COVID end? That's a good question to ask, because right now it seems like things are dropping off. We've had the peak, maybe. Really, the threat of COVID ends when we have a vaccine. Because if you think of yourself as a leader, the only time it's safe to let people go out, act as normal, is if there's an antidote, as it were, or a way to protect the rest of the population to further infection, and that happens when you have a vaccine. We've tested this idea of, is it seasonal? It doesn't seem like it because it occurred all over the world at the same time. There's hardly any effective coordinated global strategy to handle it. Every country is sort of off doing their own thing. There haven't been many effective treatments. Herd immunity has been tried in a place like England, and then the prime minister caught COVID. So, that is like a very risky strategy, this idea that just let everybody get COVID and hopefully we develop an immunity is very risky. So what we expect will happen is that until we get a vaccine, we're going to have a protracted, what we call whack-a-mole situation, where, I don't know if you've ever played that game at the arcade store where the crocodile comes up and you hit it, and then it comes up on that side and you hit it. In South Africa, we've seen a bit of this, where there's some areas where there's sort of a very high, high rate of infection. So like the Western Cape, for instance, or Gauteng, and there are other places where it's easy, it's less, so people will relax sort of lockdown measures in places where there's not a high infection rate. And then when it flares up again, maybe during winter, when there's a winter peak, you then use restrictive measures to bring it down, and then you play that game. It goes down, you open it up, gets worse, you close it again until we have a vaccine. So that's sort of where we find ourselves right now. Could you just give me 1 second quickly? I just want to just stay with me very, very quickly. Okay, cool, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. So here we are. Cool. So what does a recovery scenario look like? Well, you have just give me 1 second. Cool. Sorry about that, everybody. So extended lockdown period for about 21 days. Sorry, I just had some background noise and I just asked everybody to keep quiet. It's really distracting. So you have 21-day lockdown period, after which you'll have, which already, this is quite an optimistic scenario. So originally it looked like 21 days, then extended social distancing. That 21 days was extended to 5 weeks. Now we're having extensive social distancing, probably a peak in June, July, and then sort of a global recovery if things return to normal, and then sort of an adjustment to normal late September into the end of the year. Now, what we expect, given what we've seen so far, is that the adjusting to normal is probably going to be pushed out quite a bit later than September, and possibly into next year. So we don't know that this will happen this way, but we expect that it will be at least this or quite a bit worse. So let's go back to our scenarios. And let's just unpack these things a little bit more. So as I mentioned earlier, so COVID-19 not an equal opportunity offender. And there are industries that have been particularly negatively impacted. And quite frankly, they might not recover to the same extent that, well, they might not recover fully again. And we're seeing this in the decisions that many companies are making. I spoke to a business owner yesterday who said they've turned an events company into a company that now produces furniture, because they just need to keep people employed. And they don't see this thing recovering in the next year, and they can't have a year of not sort of things getting better. So travel and tourism, logistics, live entertainment, sporting events. I mean, sporting events are beginning to plan to open again, but with no people in the stadiums. So imagine all the revenue from ticket sales. I went to Barcelona last year and went to watch Barcelona play one game. I got a ticket right at the top of the stand and I paid 2,000 Rand. I'll never do it again. Imagine 100,000 people spending 2,000 to 6,000 Rand for ticket, and they're playing 40 games a year. Imagine Barcelona not having any attendees at the events again. That is a monumental amount of money that they will never make up again, or they won't make next year, and that they've lost in the current season. It is a huge impact. Manufacturing, the automotive sector. I don't know when last you filled up your fuel. I normally fill up my car once a week. During the 8 weeks of lockdown, I filled up my car once. I've got a friend who works for Engine. Huge impact on revenue. So these things, might not recover, all of them find themselves in these kind of industries. Then the industries that have received increasing demand, so we all wearing masks. I never wore masks before. Medical supplies, social media, companies that provide remote working and online education solutions, things like Zoom. These are industries that have seen increased demand. And then there are those that are sort of ambiguous. So you have certain businesses that sort of are quite neutral, either because nothing has changed yet, or because we're uncertain of, or they could swing either way. So this is sort of, you can find yourself in one of these three spaces at the moment. Where does the future lie? If we're beginning to think about ways to position ourselves to be better able to take advantage of what's new. And maybe just to spend a moment thinking about this, right? So if you've been involved in any of the conversations, you will know that there's been a lot of talk over the past 2 or 3 years about the fourth industrial revolution. When Cyril Ramaphosa became president, he put together the fourth industrial revolution committee, where they really spoke about how do we position South Africa to take advantage of this. So you had these different industrial revolution, the steam engine, electricity, all those kind of things, computing. And now you're having the blurring between high-powered computing and the individual. So you're getting computers who can do the work of human beings, and there's all this AI and this confluence of all these different, this blurring of the lines between what is digital and what is real. This is really what we're talking about. Each of these had increasing degrees of automation. Before you had to walk, then you had an engine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what COVID really seems to have done is accelerated the urgency of this fourth industrial revolution. To give an example, so I'm a chartered accountant. As part of the chartered accountant sort of profession cycle, we had this CA 2025, which was a 5-year journey to get to a place where you will have the CA of the future. If you retrain yourself and you develop these certain skills, you'll be a valuable person in 5 years' time. We're finding that in order to be relevant today, you need to be the CA of 2025 in 2020, because people are looking for that skill now, because COVID has accelerated this blurring between the lines of digital and real more quickly. And so when you're thinking about your career right now, you're thinking about what are the problems that need solving today, and how can you be part of the solution to those problems? So medical needs, huge problem. Getting food to people. So before you could have Pick and Pay, everybody went to Pick and Pay. More and more people are scared to go out and go fetch their groceries. So can you take food to people? Can you develop a solution for that? Creative solutions for working from home, making people's home more work friendly. Can you help do that? Accurate and timely information. Mental health is becoming a bigger thing as we socializing less with people. New forms of art, new forms of entertainment. These are new kinds of problems that need to be solved. This is what sort of the roadmap looks like from where we sit in terms of how things are going to sort of return to sort of normal. There will be industries, heavy industries, where government will need to support. These industries will fail if government don't help support them right now through this crisis and help them transition. We will still need them. They'll probably look different. Essential service supplies will keep going. The services sector will change. And this is a huge opportunity for those of us in South Africa, because one of the benefits that this remote working model has had is it's made our market bigger. So before, if I was in Cape Town, I'd be the preferred person to help the business down the road, because I'm here, he can meet me, I'll go visit him every now and then, and I understand his language, and things are great. But today, if there's a person in New York who needs an accounting service, and there's an accountant living 1 block away from him, that accountant has no more advantage than I have in reaching out to him, because both of us will have to reach out to him online. So I've got a market that extends to New York. I happen to speak English, and I've got the added advantage that I earn rands, so I can charge a lot less than that guy in New York, because my living expenses are a lot cheaper, and the rand is so cheap for an American. So your audience becomes a lot bigger, and you can sell your services to a global audience. And that's very beneficial for us, because we are one of the few English-speaking countries in the world. And we're able to do things like teach English and provide services to other countries. Education goes online, huge opportunity. Retail shifts to delivery, we mentioned that. There's a lot of funding for businesses to transition. So we'll still need different things, but many businesses will need to transition the way they operate to a place where they can actually provide services in a new way. And then a big pivot to some of the emerging growth industries that we mentioned on the previous slide, and others that will become apparent. So this is quite important. Now, there are three ways in which wherever you're at, the industry that you're in will be impacted. The one is cyclical, the one is structural, the one is catalytic. Cyclical effects are, let's say I'm a grocer, corner shop guy, nobody can come to my shop for COVID. So there's a blip in the radar. But when COVID is over, everybody comes back, and all it was is just a blip in the radar. That's one way that an industry can be affected. The other two ways are a bit more interesting, and we've seen this play out a few times. The one is structural effects. So that is, the industry is never the same again. And a good example of that is 9/11. So if you've ever traveled before 9/11, you'll know that you could rock up to the airport 10 minutes before the plane went off. You could walk in there with like a, I don't know, a gun if you wanted to. I mean, nobody really, security wasn't a big thing. You could walk in there with a gun, a bazooka, an inchaka, whatever, and it'd be fine. 9/11 happened, and a few things changed immediately. One, queues started to develop outside lines. People were checking your socks, your shoes, take off your belt, unpack anything. If you've got a toothpick in your bag, they'll confiscate it. Like, things were crazy. And those things have actually never changed. The way we travel today is very different to the way we traveled before 9/11. And the industry has been forever affected by that event. Catalytic effects are things that actually allow companies to grow much faster than they ever planned. And this is the moment that we're seeing in the Western world. The Asian economies experienced this during SARS, when people also had to socially distance and they couldn't go out and do things. That's why you see many Asians wear masks, because they had that phase that they had to go through with the SARS epidemic. And there was this company called Alibaba, which was a small little online store. People's behaviors weren't in tune with buying online, but when you couldn't buy physically, guess what? You went and you changed your habit so that you bought online. And as a result of that, that catalyzed the entire business, and the business grew. And today, Alibaba is one of the biggest online sort of marketplaces in the world. And Jack Ma, its founder, is a multi-billionaire, several times over, one of the richest people in the world. And it's all because things changed during the time of SARS, that people's behaviors changed, and therefore the business became more attractive. And we're seeing the same thing happen with Zoom and with other businesses during this time. Cool. So what are some of the impacts of COVID? There's potentially a major cyclical effect. So what that means, if you're an employee or business, 1 or 2 months of low income, if you were thinking about a promotion this year, forget about it. Just, if you don't get it, it's not personal. Your boss just doesn't have money, very likely to push it out by a year. Large companies are able to keep sort of things going. There's a potential for retrenchments. If the cycle is extended, if COVID actually takes a lot longer to go away, you can expect this to worsen. So 3 to 6 months of low income before you can even think of an increase. If you're self-employed, you might have to readjust to newer reality. So go on a trajectory where you actually use the time to reorientate yourself. If you're employed, there's a higher chance of retrenchment in a prolonged downturn, and also no government intervention. So right now, government is supporting, but there's only so long that money can last. In an extended scenario, you're basically on your own, and it might mean a major pivot. So, in each of these scenarios, Lerato and all these people affected by different ones, all of them have lower income. 2 will need to adjust to new reality, and Lerato faces retrenchment. And we spoke about the impact on your personal finances. I'll leave this question to the end. So if you have any questions about how to think about your finances during this time, we can talk about that, but it's important to reflect. I want to take you through the Lerato situation and just look at so what we do with individuals is we help them develop a life strategy, a plan to navigate a particular scenario. And Lerato's is just an example of one of the ways somebody in her position has used the crisis to reorientate themselves and to navigate this crisis. Now, your situation will be different to hers, your job will be different to hers, but hopefully this just stimulates with some ideas of how you can think about this, if you're in a particular place of vulnerability, as Lerato is. So a good thing to do right now is to have an honest conversation with yourself and just reassess where you're at. Look, the reality will come to bite you wherever you find yourself. And many of us sort of put our heads in the sand when things are tough. We don't want to look at our budget or our debt or all these things. It's going to come and bite you sometime, and you're far better able to navigate it if you take ownership of it. And I really want to encourage you to have that honest conversation, reassess your spending, reassess your savings, and really ask yourself, is this the best I can do? How can I adjust? So what she does is she organizes a budget, she reviews the emergency fund, she makes sure she assesses the access to credit, like what's my credit record, bad, good, do I have still space over there? Access to long-term savings, does she have any? And reviews the medical aid, and she knows what's in there, insurance, all these things. She just sort of just does a reassessment and just puts it all on one piece of paper. She gets where she's going. The next thing is, the next 2 months is really a phase two. We'll play this out in the timeline next. But let me actually look at my options. So what government support is there available? What is my employer doing? And how does that actually tangibly affect me? I mean, many people aren't aware of these things. We found out in our company, we got a grant and money was put into our accounts. It saved the company, quite a large amount of money per company because the government was actually supporting, one of these initiatives. I think it was the Oppenheimer Fund that had made funds available to businesses like our own. And we got quite a bit of money each. And that saved the business quite a bit of money. Then over a longer period of time, you can begin to think about starting a side hustle. So with a certain amount of planning, you can begin to think about, what are some of the different things I can now do? Contract work becomes a thing. You can now begin to pivot and think about teaching online as a way to generate additional income. And there are huge opportunities in that space. And then you can then move to a place where you can actually build towards starting your own thing if that is an option for you. And this is definitely something for Lerato to think about, building a career strategy with more opportunities, starting your own thing potentially, and repositioning a skill set. So this is what she ends up doing. Again, this is not for all of us to do. It's just an example of one of the ways that you can navigate this journey. So with Lerato, she assesses and she realizes she's got 2 months savings. So obviously expenses have dropped. She had some savings, and that money that she has will actually keep her going for 2 months. Lockdown's a great time to save. I don't know how much money you spent at restaurants or going out or driving around, but I saved quite a bit of money. I spent some more money in certain areas, but I've saved a lot of money in traveling. My entertainment budget has come down to near zero because, pizza shops are closed. I can get pizza, problem. So save the money. So she does that and she saves some money. Then she recognizes that, look, I might be in a good situation now at work. Retrenchments are a real thing. We've had some painful discussions with some of the partners we've worked with where, you just get that email at the right time that, I'm sorry, next week, there's no job for you. And if you're not close to the business model, you might not be aware of that until it hits you. So be aware of the fact that this possibility exists. Then she realizes that she assesses, what support's available. She realized that there's government support lasts for 2 months, so there's a little bit of help over there. So she might be in a job for another month or two. And she begins to take the opportunity to start diversifying a skill set. So while, Netflix viewership is going up, she decides that she's going to, instead of watching more Netflix, go and actually learn a couple of more skills that can help her. In June, retrenchments are announced. So the 2 month sort of government support is up. She gets a 1 month package and she's out on her own. She immediately goes to look to teach online in South Korea, where there's a demand. They've got a strong economy. They're paying dollars. She can speak English. She's got an English qualification in South Africa, and she's able to teach. She then uses the money that she generates from the teaching, and she gives that money a job. And the money's job is to start the side hustle. And basically, she delivers stuff. She goes to a local supermarket and she begins to start over there, and she's like, I can actually help you solve this delivery problem. And she uses safety standards as her advantage to do this. Now, you might have a different example. I know people who've done masks and all sorts of other different things. That's the one that she decides she wants to adopt. She uses 1 month's salary, so of the 3 months that she had saved up, to bootstrap this idea. She then organizes her own supply chain. It takes her a couple of weeks to get off the ground. In August, the home deliveries continues to grow. She then supplements that income now that she's got it started, and she uses the income from her online teaching gig to supplement the income. And all this time, she begins to reposition herself, her career, to actually be more valuable in the new marketplace. So she, looks to get an online degree and works towards putting herself in a position where she's more valuable in a new market with skills that are transferable. What does the new world look like? Sort of a good question to ask. We don't have all the answers, but there's some things to think about. There's a new normal that's beginning to manifest. Meeting online will be normalized, so probably less travel. People like me, I used to travel 3 flights a week. I haven't flown since that last week, second week of March. Working from home, we're going to work from home for the next couple of months at least. That will become the new normal. We'll have new social norms. Going back to, I'm a hugger of epic proportions. I haven't hugged somebody properly in like 3 months. Chances are people won't be as open to doing that in the future. We'll be more concerned about personal hygiene. And think about the impact of that. Tech boom, definitely. We're all getting familiar with tech, and many times the difference between using it and not is a transition period. It's just hard for us to change our habits. COVID has forced us to change our habits. Structural decline in traveling, our attitudes towards money will change. One of the things that many of us don't plan for is for unforeseen events. You just never see it happen. But I think having gone through this crisis, we can already see that people are a lot more sensitive to potentially planning for future unforeseen events. There's an entire book of it called Black Swan by Nazim Taleb. And the whole idea is like planning for the unexpected is actually a wise thing to do, but who does it until it happens? Social justice and inequality will be highlighted. We've seen what has happened the past week, but I think more practically during COVID, especially, the way we think of our helpers, many people have been paying, domestic assistance for people who have not always been regarded haven't been given much regard during this time, as we've actually been forced to think about how we're getting money maybe for not working, or we're getting money while we're staying at home. And we realize the importance of the entire ecosystem with which we exist. I know many people have given their domestic assistants not only the time to stay at home, but also given them increases because they realize they're not paying a living wage. And so, these are things that we think about. It will probably become a bigger theme, in the way post-COVID looks. And I think that'll be quite a positive change. And then new artists, new art forms. Also, one of the things that is changing is that in the past, you could do things when things are well and people have money. People come up with some crazy ideas that actually don't amount to much. Past couple of years, there's been a huge sort of Bitcoin craze. Nobody's talking about Bitcoin right now because, quite frankly, it's not in use and it's not really solving a huge problem. Most people were thinking about it in terms of speculating on whether the price of Bitcoin will rise or fall on the market. But now we're looking to actual solutions that solve actual problems. So being able to transfer money during a time where it's hard to transfer money electronically, knowing that you're safe at work. So solving a problem that's established and verifiable, so it's a real problem. There's a natural momentum, so COVID has moved things in a certain direction, and it's irreversible. It's unlikely to revert back to normal. If you can find something like that, that's a good definition of a problem that's worth solving. I added some of these themes. Okay, I'm going to skip through these. This is another talk that we've done that really spoke about opportunities in Africa. This is actually a good thing. So I'm talking about this slide, and I think we have one more. Yeah. So we've got 2 more slides, and then we're going to open up for questions. Now, if you're working right now, what are some of the ways in which you can develop skills? Because many people think that you need to go out and start a new business. That's not necessarily the case. There are different ways to develop new skills, and I want to just introduce them to you. The first one is you can develop what we call T-shaped skills, very powerful. And that is when you have a set of skills in one area, and then you learn a set of skills in another area. And combining those two sets of skills gives you a really big advantage. So for instance, if you were, I'm an accountant, right? So now I have to do accounting. And, or let's say and then I go and study like software developing. What I can do is I can use my knowledge in accounting with software developing to design creative solutions in the time of COVID that accountants can't necessarily do. So I become like a super accountant just by learning another skill. I don't have to be a genius in anything. I just need to know more about it than other accountants. If you're a software developer and you specialize in finance, or you can become a sort of financial, you can get involved in financial technology, or you can get involved in medicine or whatever it is, but you learn a second skill in another area that allows you to use your skill in that way. One of the ways during COVID is maybe doing something that allows you to work more effectively online. So you use your skill as a marketer, as this, as the other, and you pivot it so that you can operate more in an online environment. That's a useful way to develop T-shaped skills. Second way is actually to join a company that's working on problems of the future. So if you join a startup, there's a feeling that you're joining. It's a risky thing to do, because we know that many new businesses fail. So let's say I go and I work for a new company that's trying to solve the problem of online payments, and there are 10 people doing it. 8 of those companies might fail, right? But the thing is, when you work for a company that's working on new problems, when the other companies succeed and grow, when they grow, they don't hire from traditional institutions. They hire from people who've developed the skill of working on a modern, relevant problem. Many people are stuck in older traditional companies who haven't learned new skills, actually become very useless in the market when those companies have to downsize, because the skills that they had were for an older economy. So one of the ways you can develop skills is actually work for a company that's using innovative online tools, that's using new ways of working, that are trying to solve new problems, because the skill that you learn in doing that becomes very marketable in the bigger economy. So think about don't just think about the job that you're doing, think about what you are learning in that job, regardless of where you find yourself. Very powerful thing. If you're in a traditional company, one of the ways in which you can develop skills is by going to somebody in leadership and say, look, I want to work on this problem within your business. I'll use some of my own time. I'll just give me these resources and I will actually solve this problem. Now, what you might be doing them a favor by helping grow the business. But what you're doing for yourself is you're learning instead of doing an MBA, instead of paying for a course, you're getting them to sponsor your learning, and they're getting something very valuable in return. So using the opportunity within the business to use the skills and resources available there for you to develop yourself is a really powerful tool for creating value within your own career. Then, if you want to go out and do your own thing, don't give up your job. Those jobs are like gold today. But do something on the side. Take some of your time that you have, test it on the side, so that if it falls apart, you still have your main income, you're still secure, and learn and develop. And then if you've done all these different things, and you're at a place where your side hustle is now growing big enough, then you can make the decision. Is it a wise idea for me now? Has this thing grown big enough that I can stop doing what I'm doing? And I'm almost forced to go and pursue this thing full time. That's a safer way to do it, so that you don't create vulnerabilities for yourself. There will be those who can take the risk and do it, and for them, go ahead and do it. For most of us, we need the security of a regular job, and that's okay, because all of us are different. Last slide, and then we can take whatever questions you might have. Now, I'm not saying this in a theological sense, but this is not the end of the world. When the end of the world comes, the end of the world will come. But until it comes, the world will continue in some way, shape, or form. And as a professional, it's important to still think about how can you be valuable in the world that is. If you're a Christian, for instance, I'm a Christian, I want to be an example. One of the ways I can have influence and, share the view of the world that I have with other people is by actually being successful in my corporate career. And in order for me to do that, I need to think about what are the problems that need solving and how can I best solve it and be a Christian at the same time. So people look to me and be like, this is an interesting guy. Let me learn about what he believes in. So people will still need places to live. People will still want to connect with other human beings. People will still need to be inspired, educated, and entertained. Most definitely, this is the most important one of all. People will still need to eat good food. I still like eating at good restaurants. This is a very important part of my life. If you're good at making good food, I will always be your best supporter and best friend. So, very important part of life. We want purpose and meaning in our lives. We want new experiences that tell us more about ourselves, other people, and other places. So we'll still be human. So when you're thinking about the world, if you're going through a retrenchment, if you are going through a tough point, know that the world will still continue. And the challenge for you and I is to find a way that we can be valuable in whatever changes are happening, whatever new is. How can we be valuable in that? And I think, as young people in a forum like this, there's people who definitely have the right perspective to actually attend something like this. It's very valuable for us to wear that hat, to look at the world through that lens and see COVID not as an injustice or afflicted upon us or something negative, but really look at it and say, what is the opportunity? What am I learning from this? What is the opportunity for me to really make a difference and to be valuable? And I really encourage you along that journey. And yeah, wish you every success. I'm on the same journey myself, and I'm sure each of us are. So yeah, God bless. That's a presentation. I've got a few links to share if you're interested in connecting with me or finding out more about what we do. Also the tool again. So if Natasha wanted to show that, I can do that. But other than that, I've ended the formal presentation. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take it. Or if you have any questions.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much, Grant. Maybe you can just close your screen share and then we will pop up on the screen. Perfect. I have to thank you so much, Grant, for your not just sharing the sort of resources and information and data with us, but just giving your spin on it as well, especially in the context of professionals that are viewing, and also just the general public as well. I actually have two questions for you. So one is quite practical. And this would count for all of us, not just the millennials, not just women, but all of us. What advice can you give for saving options during this period? And I think what the person means by period is, we are still in the lockdown. We're on level 3. Not sure when the next level will open up, but for this specific point in time that we are in now, saving options. What is your advice?
So, good question. I mean, that question can have many different levels. So I'll answer it in sort of a few ways, just because depending on where the person is, they might be thinking about, a whole lot of different things. So I'll do it. If you think I'm missing the answer, I'll pivot. So the first thing is, like, many people are asking the question, do I invest in the market now? Because there's, everything has been discounted. All the prices have gone down, and people are always saying, like, invest now because it's going to go up. I definitely don't encourage that. I don't encourage either way. I encourage, like, almost being neutral towards the market, because the market going up and down is a zero-sum game. There's a reason why the price is going down, and you don't know where the bottom is going to be. And if you are, you're making a bet. And if anybody tells you they know, they're lying, because nobody really knows. They might not know that they're lying. They might be telling a mistruth, being genuinely trying to give good advice, but nobody really knows. So the advice is, if you're saving a retirement fund or whatever it is, and you still have an income, just continue doing what you have been doing. If you invest your money consistently over a long period of time, you even out the risk. Let the money managers do what they do. So invest in reputable companies who sort of have a policy for investing in this. I think one of the speakers, I think Lazal was it. Let these guys study a lot. They know what they're doing. Rather let them make good decisions, because we definitely don't have an information advantage over people who study this every day, study a long time before get good information. So don't try and time the market. I wouldn't say that. if you're saving, a good question to ask yourself, what are you saving for? And also, what are your current circumstances? So if you are wary of the fact that you might be vulnerable, susceptible to a drop in income, and you want to, or you might lose your job, you want to keep your money in a place, one, where the money is easily accessible. So you don't want to tie it up into some 5-year product that some fancy guy who's selling you so they can get the commission up front is going to do. No. You want to put it in something where it's easily accessible, and you want to invest in somewhere where the base of the money is not at risk. So investing in long term is very different to investing over the short term. If I might need this money within a year, 2 years, 3 years, you want to effectively invest it in a money in a vehicle where you're basically getting predominantly interest as a return, and the base of the money isn't at risk. It's not going to fluctuate depending on the market going up or the market going down. So you might not get the best return in the short term, but your base, your 1,000 Rand will still be 1,000 Rand with a little bit of interest, effectively. So that's what you want to do. If you're saving for retirement, continue saving where you've been saving. You need to have exposure to the equity markets and all those things so that over a long period of time, it will grow with the economy. But I'd say you can go simple to your local bank. So if you Capitec, if you FNB, Standard Bank, you can choose the money market option over there. It's not going to be the best return, but you move that money, you siphon it off into that account, you'll get some interest, you'll get a reasonable interest rate, and your capital won't be at risk. So I'd say just go to a money market account, put that money in your money market account, link to your bank account, and that will be okay. There's slightly better options you can get here and there. You can go to an investment manager and get a slightly higher return, but if it's for the short term, that should be okay. And that's where you want to put your emergency fund money. Once you're moving beyond that, maybe speak to somebody. We're a company that does independent financial advice, so we don't have our own products, so we can advise you on where to go. There are other companies who might do the same. There definitely are better options, but for now, go to your bank account, ask them for the money market option, put it in there. You can access it within 2 days if you need to. You get a nice interest return, and your capital is not at risk. You're not going to become rich, but your money is safer.
I think. Thanks, Grant. I think you answered, I think in totality, you might have answered the second question as well, but I will just pose it in case one of these words spark another type of answer that you can give. So the other question is, would it be wise to invest money in the stock market now or to buy assets? I mean, especially for millennials that are quite established and those that are a bit older. And if they are of a certain age and planning at a certain level in their lives, they're getting married, they're having their first child, they potentially might have made some moves between December 2019 and January, which is normally the time where some people, they move house, they've just come from holiday. So yeah, in terms of, large financial movements, what is your response to that?
No, great question. So I think so again, depends on what the decision is. And I'll illustrate a few. So if you are going to, so I'd say, let's start with the short one, right? So if the money is for an emergency fund, do exactly what I've said now, right? Easy to access in the same account that you have, just go to your bank, get the money market fund. And if it's just for emergency buffer, do that. If it's for a medium-term goal, so let's say anywhere between 6 or 8 months to 3 years, you want to then put it in, again, largely interest generating sort of place, so money market fund, I'd say. But you probably want to look around, because some of the banks and the bigger mutual funds, they have quite a high overhead, right? Because they've got these big companies and they do life stuff and they've got all these high overheads. So the cost that they're charging you is quite high. Just picture Old Mutual. It's like a huge company and they have like all these. So if you're going to buy a short-term saving product that another smaller company can also provide, that have to follow the same principles, the overhead that they apply to their costs is normally quite high and you won't get a good return on those things. So then I'd rather go look around and compare the costs of different investments, reputable institutions, and maybe look at a few of them and get a better return, but still in a money market type thing where my capital is not at risk. Because if you're looking to get married, you don't want to come to a week before you go to the altar and realize that your 30,000 Rand has now become 20,000 Rand because Donald Trump decided to say black lives don't matter. And you know, your fund just hit the ground, and then you're going to go there with half a wedding dress and one shoe, like to the altar. That's not a good idea. So what you want to do is money market. Don't risk it. Yes, you might have a friend who puts it in the market, and guess what? It goes up the other way. Donald Trump becomes an angel. People like America's great. You know, your money doubles, and there you walked away with a Ferrari, and you sitting with the same suit. At least you don't want to take a risk on your wedding. You don't take a risk on the deposit for your house. You don't want to take a risk in the short-term period on those things. So be safe. Then, if the horizon is longer, you want to expose yourself more and more to equity returns. So if it's 5 to 8 years or 5 to 10 years, you might not want to go fully into equity because it's still a bit of a risk, but you might want to have more equity exposure. And so they're different. They're like balance funds and things like that. When you want to invest for your retirement, you obviously want to have a higher equity return. Now, the problem with during COVID is if you are trying to time the market, so if you have a big lump sum transaction and you want to just put it in now, I strongly suggest phasing in the investment over a period of time. You might realize as you do that if you had just done it a week earlier, you could have gotten X amount more. If you want to play in that game, you're welcome to do that. I don't recommend that at all because that's not your job. If you're going to play the game of like time in the market, you don't have the information asymmetry. You don't really. It's a two-way. It's a zero-sum game. Somebody's going to gain, somebody's going to lose. If you want to bet with somebody else, if that guy is smarter than you, he's got more information than you, which is very likely to be the case, you stand a good chance of losing hard-earned savings. So I'd say if you want to invest a lump sum at this stage, I would definitely not try and time the market. I'd rather just phase it. And if it's, let's say I've got 40,000 Rand, that's a lot of money to me. I do 5,000 every month or something like that, where over a long period of time, I just phase it in and I let the cards fall where they lie. And it's just a more responsible way of doing it. So I wouldn't put it in. What I'd rather do is just put in the money market for now, generate some interest, and then phase it into sort of higher risk investment over a period of time so that I don't put all my risk in one go. I hope that helps. I hope that's sort of helpful.
And then the last question.
Speak to somebody who knows, like find a trusted advisor. This is a good person who will have the conversation with. Is somebody worth, paying something for, because these decisions can often be quite big.
Perfect, thank you. So Grant, just to end off our session this evening, there's one tiny question still.
Of course, I don't mind.
So this one is actually in the context of, okay, so, upfront we have let our viewers know that this is a professional presentation and we're dealing with it from that perspective. But so to end it off, I'd like to actually ask you to say, just end of this presentation with one or two things as a faith-based person and as a Christian. What is the one or two things as we conclude that you can add in terms of how we as a faith-based community and our view, this view that we then have of our finances and how it plays into our life as Christians? What is your view on that?
Okay, very broad question. You can ask me a follow-up if you want to, but I think so. Especially in the faith community that I'm part of, there's a lot of talk about eschatology, and what that means in plain English is just talking about what the Bible talks about when it talks about the end of days scenario, the last days. And when something like COVID happens, it definitely brings to mind a lot of the talk in Revelation, in Matthew chapter 24, in the book of Daniel. And it just reminds us of things that we see this imagery and parallels to things that we've read somewhere. And it can very well cause us to sort of go into end time mode where you're like, okay, nothing else matters. Let me just, focus on whatever it is. And I think there's a part of that that is, as a Christian, I think important, recognizing the moment, right?
Yeah.
But I think what's also important is that, God has placed a calling on each of our lives, and it's different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing something, if you're a professional, and you believe, you've prayed about it, God's guided you through your life, and you believe that you're called to be an accountant, a designer, somebody that produces food, is an engineer solving problems, then don't underappreciate, don't underappreciate, don't undervalue the calling that God has placed in your life. That is a ministry. And one of the ways in which you can be an effective minister for the gospel is to do what you're doing faithfully. So if you're involved in that, and if God has called you to ministry, if God calls you in this time to go to ministry, then do ministry with all your heart. But the Bible says, whatever your hand finds to do, do that with all your might. Mm-hmm. Don't be a half-baked accountant. Don't be a half-baked engineer. Don't be a slothful teacher. Don't be a bad teacher. You are losing the opportunity to be a witness for God. Be the best accountant you can be. You will do God a huge service. Be the best teacher, the best, whatever it is God has called you to. That is super important. That is as much being a faithful Christian as it is preaching the gospel, if that's where God's called you to be. In fact, if you're out being a pastor and God's called you to be a teacher, you're actually doing God a disservice. And God is not pleased because He called you to be a teacher. Why aren't you doing that? So I think that's the thing. I think the same is true for our finances, right? So finances, when we think about money in terms of the Bible, God's really talking to us. He's called us to be stewards. And what that means is God has given us a certain amount of resources to do certain things with on His behalf. Now, a big part of that is being a faithful provider to your family or to your loved ones. Many of us in our situation in South Africa, we're the primary breadwinners in a larger community. Sometimes we're supporting our parents, sometimes we're supporting grandparents, sometimes we are supporting people, cousins, nephews who are connected to us but are more vulnerable. Some people have sacrificed so that we can get higher levels of education. Supporting them is one of the most godly things you can do if that's where God has placed you and you felt it calling upon your life. So be responsible with what God has given you. And I think it is important to still to assess your role, and then to the extent that God has called you to respond to that, to be faithful in that regard. If God has called you to give your money to a cause, do that. But don't compare your calling to somebody else's. Rather show by example that this is a good way to do it, and let God, sort of put the burden on somebody else to also do the same. But focus on what's important to you. Supporting your parents, being responsible about your children and planning for their future and their education, providing a shelter, and all these things are very noble things that provide a good example to society of what a good Christian human being is. And I really just encourage people to do this thing prayerfully, but not to underappreciate. Your parents haven't become less important. Your ability to be influential, invest in your education, all these things have not become less important. And as long as you do these things prayerfully, according to the values that you hold, I would not easily neglect those things. And I think we should continue to do that. I hope that helps. I don't know if you have a follow-up to that.
No, that's perfect. Grant, I'd like to thank you so much for sharing with us. And please remember, to our listeners out there, I will be posting the links that Grant has mentioned in his presentation in the comment section, as well as on the Girl Positive page, if you'd like to make contact with him or his company. And so I'd like to...
I think there was one link I never shared with you, so I'll just share it with you directly, and you can check it out. If you think it's appropriate to share, you can share it with them as well.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, Grant, thank you so much. And to everyone that has joined us on the live stream, and to those who will in future be viewing this webinar slash discussion presentation as part of the resources, you are welcome to do that as well. So once again, thank you, Grant. And to those out there listening, have a good evening, a good, successful and healthy and happy and especially positive week ahead. Thanks so much for joining us. Good evening.
Bye, everybody.